Hello everyone, it's Mafalda and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm here to talk about my recent reads from the last few months of 2023. I did this all throughout of last year, so I did a video for my recent reads of January till April, and then I did one from May till August, and then I just completely forgot to do one for the last few months of the year, also because I just felt like I had talked about pretty much all of the books that I wanted to talk about, either on my favorite books of the year or just vlogs that I did. So I was just thinking of skipping these last few months, but I think it still makes sense to kind of round out the year of 2023. I love doing these types of videos because I used to do like monthly wrap-ups, but sometimes there are some books that I just honestly don't really have a lot of thoughts about. I'm just like, yeah, I liked it, yeah, it was okay, or yes, I loved it, but other than that, I feel like I don't have anything to add to the conversation about that book. And that's why I love doing these types of videos, because that way I don't have to talk about every single book that I read in each month, and I can just pick and choose what books I want to talk about. And so now this recent reads is for the months from September till December of 2023, and there are some books that I've already talked about, like I said, in vlogs, or that ended up being on my favorites list of the year. But yeah, I still have a few books that I did not mention in any video or that I just want to highlight even more. And so today I'm here to talk about 6 of the books that I read throughout these months, and yeah, let's get started. So the first book that I read in September is You Don't Have a Shot by Raquel Marie, and this was overall a really fun book. I read Raquel Marie's other book, Ophelia After All, when it came out in 2022, and I just love that book so much. It's probably one of my favorite like YA books in recent years, and so when I knew that she was gonna come out with another book, I was really excited, obviously, and I ended up picking this one up on audiobook. And this is a queer YA romance, and it follows our 2 main characters, Leticia and Vale, and they are soccer rival players from 2 different teams, and then they go to their, I guess, childhood soccer camp for the summer, and they end up having to co-captain a team and kind of work together to try and win the summer like soccer camp thingy. And so this is definitely an enemies to lovers romance, because at first Vale and Leticia really don't get along because they've had a complicated history between them, but then they just have to start working together. They have to start getting to know each other a little bit better, and yeah, something starts to blossom. And I really had a great time listening to this audiobook and getting to know Vale and Leticia. I really like the 2 main characters of this, especially the story arc of Vale, because her mother passed away in the book recently and she was really close to her mother, and also her mother was also a soccer player when she was younger, and it really explores that, but also explores the complicated relationship that Vale has with her father, because her father is very overbearing and very strict with her. I really like to read about complicated family relationships. I thought the conflict was really well done and really well resolved at the end, and I just thought it made this romance book not one-dimensional, I guess, and just about the relationship between Vale and Leticia. Also, I really like to see the evolution of their relationship, because I'm a sucker for enemies to lovers. And yeah, this was overall a really fun book. I'm not gonna say it's better than Ophelia After All. I still, like, that book holds a really special place in my heart and I love it so much, but I love these stories that Raquel Marie comes up with, and I love her writing, so it was a really fun book, and honestly I had a great time listening to this audiobook. Now the next book that I would like to talk about is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield, and this was such a surprising book. I had heard a lot of great things about it, and so I just decided to pick up the audiobook because I knew it was kind of a horror book, and it was also pretty short, the audiobook, so I just gave it a go, and I was so surprised by this one. And this book is about Miri and Leah. They are married and they're trying to resume a normal life after Leah came back from a deep sea mission that ended in catastrophe. They were basically stuck at the bottom of the sea for a number of months, and no one really knows what really went down down there. And Miri is obviously glad that Leah came back and that she's back at home, but she feels like Leah is not really the same person she was before she went on that mission. And the book follows two different timelines, and it follows Miri in the present day, kind of trying to figure out what is wrong with Leah and what really happened in that mission. And it also follows Leah as she's going down into the deep sea for this exploration, and it kind of follows what really went down there, and we found out what really happened. And I couldn't stop listening to this book. It really gripped me from start to finish because I just wanted to know what really happened to Leah at the bottom of the sea. And I feel like this was also the perfect book to start kind of like the spooky season, because I read this I think at the beginning of October, and this was just such a creepy and eerie book, because not only did we not know what really happened, but also in the present day part of the story, there are some really weird things happening with Leah, and it's just so creepy. And I also really liked the audiobook for this. I had a great time with it. The narration was great, and I just honestly, I really enjoyed this book. I know everyone has been talking about it, and I honestly think it deserves the hype because it was so well done, it was so to the point, and it was the right amount of horror for me specifically. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. And the next book that I would like to talk about is Have You Seen Me by Kate White. I really wanted to continue with the mystery, thriller, horror genre in October, so I decided to pick this one up because honestly, I don't know who I heard talk about this book, but I heard someone talk about it and talk highly of it. And this book follows Ali, who is a finance journalist, and one day she's going to work and she can't really find her key card to enter her workplace, and so then she finds her boss there, but her boss is really confused when he sees her because she hasn't worked there in 5 years. And so Ali ends up going to the hospital because she's very confused of why she went to her workplace from 5 years ago, and she remembers her name and she starts to piece some things together about her life and who she's married to and what she's doing now, but she doesn't really remember what happened to her the previous 2 days, so she doesn't have any recollection of the last 2 days in her life and what really led her to go back to her old workplace. And so with the help of her therapist and the people around her, Ali tries to piece together the last 48 hours to really know what happened and why she doesn't remember anything. And the plot of this just sounds really good, but then the execution of it just wasn't really my favorite. There is another part of the story that kind of eventually ties back at the end that I honestly didn't really like. Basically, this isn't really a spoiler, I think, but basically Ali, when she was younger, she was walking in the woods around her house and she found a dead body of a girl, a young girl. And obviously that is a very traumatic event for anyone, just especially when you're young. Just finding a dead body out of nowhere is just a lot, obviously, but I felt like with the whole plot that I just mentioned and this whole part of the story, it was just, I think the book was trying to do too much. I feel like it lost itself a little bit because honestly, I didn't really care about this part of the story of when she was younger, she had this really traumatic event, and obviously it kind of relates to what is happening with her in the present moment where she's like not really sure what happened to her in the last 48 hours, but still I just feel like if you took that whole part of her childhood trauma from the story, the book would still work without that whole section of the book. I didn't really understand why the author also tried to shove that into this story specifically. I also felt like the characters were pretty boring and one-dimensional because they were acting in a really just unnatural way. They were all pretty, well, not all of them, but pretty much all of the characters around Ali were not acting like this was huge, because like if someone in my life told me that they didn't remember what happened to them in the last 48 hours, I would be in not only in shock, but I would just be super worried about them and try to help them. And I feel like the characters around Ali weren't really doing that same thing and were really shocked about this information, especially her husband. Her husband was just like very nonchalant about everything, which I guess makes sense because the whole book you're kind of like, is the husband responsible for any of this happening to Ali? And obviously, like any thriller, there is a plot twist at the end, and I do gotta say that I didn't expect the plot twist at all. I felt like the book really wasn't predictable, but I also really didn't like the ending and how the plot twist came about, I guess. It was just really weird. So that was my experience with this book. Unfortunately, I ended up giving it like a 2.5 or 3 star. It wasn't terrible, but there were some things that I personally didn't like at all, and I just feel like I'm going to forget about this book in a couple of years, so that's not good. The next book that I would like to talk about is The Woman in Me by Britney Spears, and I feel like everyone and their mother has talked about this book and raved about this book. A lot of people dedicated whole vlogs to reading this book and documenting their journey reading it and what they thought, and I honestly, I have the same opinion as everyone else. This book was amazing. So if you don't know, this is a memoir about Britney Spears' life and kind of a tell-all about her whole life and what really happened to her and the conservatorship and what she went through in 2007 and just all of that. So I grew up with Britney Spears. I do gotta say, I saw her in concert, unfortunately, in 2012. So she was already under the conservatorship, and now after reading this book and knowing that she probably didn't want to tour at that time when I saw her is really sad to think about. But yeah, I grew up with her. I love her music. Blackout is my favorite album of hers, and it shaped me, honestly. I remember listening to it nonstop on my iPod, and it was just amazing. I love that album and I love all of her music. And after reading this book, I'm just even more in awe of her. First of all, this book is really raw and it feels really authentic to her. I feel like her voice is really there, and I actually listened to the audiobook of this, and it wasn't narrated by her, which I totally understand because she didn't really want to, I guess, relive this after already writing the book, and so she got Michelle Williams to narrate the book, and I feel like she did an amazing job telling Britney's story. And like I said, the book is just very authentic to her. I feel like we really see her voice. Obviously, she probably had a ghostwriter like every other celebrity does for these types of books, and I don't know, the book just felt really her, and I really appreciated that. And it was amazing to hear her story in her own words, and it was just so unbelievable what she went through. Like, she's such a strong person. Like, you never really know what's going on in a person's life, and yeah, it was just a beautiful book. I teared up multiple times. There were so many hard things that she talked about, and I really commend her for going through all of that again and writing this book. Yeah, it was beautiful. I love the book, and I feel like I'm just repeating what everyone else has already said, but yeah, the book was amazing and I highly recommend it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. And after reading The Woman in Me, I was also really curious about another memoir that came out last year, which was Paris the Memoir by Paris Hilton. And this is, like the title says, a memoir about Paris Hilton's life. And I also, a couple of years ago, I saw a documentary, I don't know what it was called, but it was here on YouTube, and it was about Paris and what she went through in her teenage years, where her parents sent her to this kind of school, I guess, not really a school, but like kind of almost a juvie place for rich kids, where she was really mistreated. And I remember watching that documentary a couple of years ago, and it really changed my opinion about Paris. I kind of remember watching A Simple Life when I was younger, but very like few episodes because I was still really young when that TV show came out. But yeah, I've obviously known about Paris Hilton all my life, and I do gotta say that before watching that, I didn't really have the best impression on Paris Hilton. I kind of honestly didn't really have an opinion on her. I just knew that she grew up in a really rich and privileged family and position, and that's all I really knew about her. And I didn't really know all of the struggles that she went through when she went to that place. I don't really remember the name, but honestly, that doesn't matter. And I was really interested in hearing more about her story and about her life, and so this memoir was also really good. The audiobook was narrated by her, and like The Woman in Me by Brittany, I felt like this book felt very Paris, and I honestly, I don't even know if she had like a ghostwriter or anything helping her with this, because it just, I don't know, the way that the book is written, it just felt like she wrote it all herself. And if she did, honestly, kudos to her, because it just feels very authentic. And the writing isn't great, but honestly, like, Paris is not a writer, so it makes sense. Also, I didn't know that she had ADHD. That's something that I found out about the book, and that is something that I struggled with the book, is that I felt like the organization and the way that the book is structured is very all over the place, but it also at the same time it makes sense because of her ADHD, so it's kind of like the way her mind works. But again, I really liked the book, and I loved getting to know Paris a little bit more and to know a little bit more of the details of why she went to that place that really traumatized her, and the aftermath of that, and how she is overcoming that trauma. And yeah, I really enjoyed that part of the story. The only thing that really annoyed me about the book is that like every 2 or 3 pages she would mention NFTs, and we all know that interview that she gave with Jimmy Fallon where they're talking about NFTs, and it's the cringiest thing ever. And this book just didn't really help with that at all, because like every few sentences she was like, oh, and my NFTs, and that's why I'm investing in NFTs. And I just, like, I felt like it was a really, I don't know, a dated thing about the book. I feel like in a few years, when NFTs aren't really talked about ever, it's gonna be like, what the hell is she talking about? I just feel like it's a very like 2021 2022 thing, also because a lot of times the way that the NFTs were mentioned were really not relevant to the story, so I was like, why is she mentioning this again? But still, I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was a fun memoir, and I loved getting to know more about Paris, and I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. And the next book that I want to talk about, I read back in December, and I actually have a vlog on my channel where I am reading this book and I talk a little bit about it, but I just wanted to mention it again because I really loved it. So, and that is Word Sled, A Feminist Guide to Taking Back the English Language by Amanda Montell. And this book was such a blast. I loved this book, and I know it's pretty popular, and I've seen some people talk about it, and I've seen it a lot on Bookstagram as well, but I just feel like everyone should read this book and will take something out of it. I feel like this was such an interesting take on linguistics and feminism and just the way we talk and process language, I guess. And it really made me think about some things that I've never really thought about, and how biased the language is we use. And I feel like this book is not only interesting and thought-provoking, but it's also really funny. I feel like Amanda Montell has such a way with words. Obviously she's a linguistics scholar, so it makes sense, but she has such a way of telling a story and grabbing such an academic subject like the English language and feminism as well, and just making it like approachable and fun. And yeah, I just honestly, I took so much out of this book. I've been thinking about so many things that I guess thought about after reading this book ever since I read it, and it's just such a great book. I couldn't recommend it enough. I actually listened to the audiobook while I read it physically, and it was such a great experience because I think the audiobook is narrated by Amanda Montell, if I'm not mistaken, and I felt like the narration was great, and I was just like tabbing things as I went through the book. I really wasn't expecting to like this book as much as I did, but I'm so glad that I read it. And yeah, I ended up giving this one 5 out of 5 stars. And that concludes my recent reads from September till December of 2023. And there are some other books that I could have mentioned in this video, but I feel like I already mentioned in other videos, so there's no point of talking about them again. If you've read any of the books that I talked about today, leave a comment saying what you thought of them. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you on my next one. Bye!